This program does not provide medical advice. We assume no liability for the information provided on MindForce Radio. Please consult your physician before beginning any exercise or nutrition program.
This is Roger LaPointe, and I have known Bob Whelan for many years at this point, and he is one of the most intense individuals you will ever meet. Go MindForce Radio.
Direct from MindForce Radio, this is Natural Strength Night with Maximum Bob. On Natural Strength Night, we don't talk about the other things Bob likes to talk about. Tonight, we only talk strength training. When I say strength training, I don't mean training like punk-ass goons in the muscle magazines who jacked up on juice, steroids, and PEDs. I mean natural strength. Strength built on good food, heavy weights, and no shortcuts. If you want to learn about real natural strength, weight training the right way, the old school way, stick around. Bob and his friends just might teach you something.
He's here, the host of Natural Strength Night, Maximum Bob Whelan.
Tonight, our guest is Mike Bondurant. Mike is well known as one of the top Iron Game memorabilia collectors and physical culture historians in the world. He's especially known as the guy who knows the history of strength equipment. He is the founder of the Muscle Museum in St. Augustine, Florida. He's also the publisher of the Muscle Museum Forum newsletter. I'm going to have to drive up and visit Mike now that I'm in Florida. Mike sounds like a man half his age, but don't let his youthful voice fool you. He's well into his 70s, and he has over 60 years' experience in the field of strength training, and he's done it all, from running his own gyms to selling equipment and nutritional products, running natural bodybuilding contests, writing numerous strength training articles, and his own personal training business. If you're going to be anywhere near St. Augustine, Florida, you have to stop by and visit the Muscle Museum. Mike owns one of the world's finest collections of unique Iron Game historical items that are the envy of collectors worldwide. Mike doesn't have a website, but you can contact him by email at mikebd1@bellself.net. That's MIKEBD, the number 1 at bellself.net. And Big Mike, welcome to Natural Strength Night.
Bob, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
So, Mike, tell us about your Muscle Museum. What gave you the idea? What year did you start it, and how has it grown?
Well, back in the 70s, when I first started my gym, actually before I started my gym, so it must have been about 71, I found a Burr barbell set in a garage sale. And it was really nice. The whole, the nice chrome sleeve and everything. And with it was a pair of Jowett fulcrum bells, which were little bells that with a wooden handle and, this kind of thing, really old. And I bought them, and that sort of got me interested in old stuff. Before that, I would have thought old stuff would, I wasn't interested. But once I got those, and then a few years later, my wife gave me a pair of wooden dumbbells, and that really started it. I put those. By then, I had my gym, and I put them up in a little glass cabinet there, and people would come by and ask about them. I'd never even seen wooden dumbbells before at that point.
Mike, what is the address of your place if people want to come visit it?
Oh, it's 247 Cortez Drive, St. Augustine, Florida.
I remember your newsletter. You had that Muscle Museum newsletter for a long time.
8 years we did, and we put out 20 issues. And, that was quite popular. My daughter helped me with it. She's a graphic artist, and she moved to Australia, or actually back to Australia, and then I started doing it myself.
Now, you had some great pictures of your old equipment in there.
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing that. It was fun, and we had some pictures of my stuff, and people would send in pictures of their stuff and tell me stories and all, and I enjoyed passing that on, and people seemed to like it.
What are some of your most prized pieces in the museum?
Well, I'm really a kind of an iron freak. I like the equipment probably more than anything, more than the books or the pictures or anything. And I would say my most prized one, I have a teardrop French barbell. And we call it a teardrop because instead of round globular ends, they're shaped more like a teardrop. And that I got from my good friend Mike Farah out in California. And this thing came to the United States in the early 20th century and was probably made in the 1880s or 1890s. Yeah, it's a shot-loaded kind of thing, but I've never seen another one like it, and I guess that's probably just one of my favorites. And then I have a Samson dumbbell, globe dumbbell, that very much like the Milos. And that's a one-of-a-kind. I don't know anybody that's got one of those. Couple of Milo barbells and some various, stuff like that. Those are, I guess, my favorite.
Yeah, it must be real thrilling when you come across something, because it's very hard now to get that old equipment. Do you put ads in the paper or go to garage sales and look for the old equipment, or does it just you just kind of stumble upon it by accident, or how do you do it?
I used to, when I had my gym and my supplement business, I was on the road one day a week, and being kind of lazy like I am, I spent a fair amount of time, going through antique stores and that kind of thing, because that was before the internet, and so it was not as it's much easier to find today. Now the problem is paying for it because the prices have gone through the roof.
It seems like 40 years ago, there weren't a lot of people that were interested in the old-timers and the old stuff like there is now. I mean, now everybody wants that stuff. So It's just hard to get your hands on it.
Well, 20 years ago, I somehow or another connected with Reuben Weaver up in Virginia. And I think at that time, I believed at that time we were the only ones that were interested. Later on, we found there were a few, but there was no communication like there is today among the collectors, and so that made it kind of thrilling to find somebody that was all interested in the same thing.
Now, Mike, I know you have met the great Sig Klein, and you actually visited his gym in New York City. So that must have been so cool. Could you tell us what that was like?
Yeah, I was a teenager, and I believe that was just before I went into the Army. So I must have been about 18. And my folks were military people, and they were living in New Jersey. So I went over one day and found the gym and walked up the stairs. I think it was on the 3rd floor, and walked in, and this little guy comes out in a white tank top, just like an undershirt tank top. And I guess he was, 5'5", 5'6", a little short guy, much shorter than I thought he was, smoking this stogie cigar. But he had an impressive pair of arms, I'll say that for him. And we chatted for a while, and I think he has a reputation for being a pretty tough guy. But we got along fairly well. He was, I won't say he was nice to me, but he wasn't discourteous or anything. He was just sort of a gruff guy.
Yeah, it seems like most of the gym owners were that way back in the day.
That's right, and I found out later on it's the only way to run a gym. Sig didn't suffer fools gladly. He wanted to know what you could do, and he sort of judged you by that. I know he was really interested. I told him I had some beer steins from Germany, and he said, "You have beer steins? You don't have beer steins?" He said. I said, "Yeah." He said, "You got any weightlifters on them?" I said, "No," and then he just turned me off. And that was the end of his interest in me. And once he knew I wasn't going to sign up for a membership and I didn't have any beer steins, he would have just as soon I left.
Yeah, because he had a huge collection of beer steins in the gym too, right?
In the gym, up on a high shelf up over the weights. He had a beautiful little gym. I mean, it was small. It had carpet and had all the globe barbells. There must have been, I'm guessing 20 pair of globe barbells lining the wall. By the way, I know where a lot of those are. I can't get them, but I know where they are.
There's some of them are in Bill Pearl's barn.
Yeah, Bill's got a few. Terry Todd, I think, has a couple. And there have been a few that have come up from time to time. I've had people call me wanting to know if I was interested. Yes, I was interested, but the prices they wanted often were just just beyond me. But this, I know one guy who got, I think he has about 10 of them.
Wow.
But he let them go, and that's the way it is.
About what year was that when you went to his gym?
I'd say that was 1959.
About how old was Sig at that time, do you think?
I'd say Sig must have been I'd say he's probably in his 50s, and he looked at, but the body was quite good for a short man that weighed maybe 160 pounds, and he probably had 16 and a half inch arms. Just my guess, but they were very impressive. Yeah, he was an impressive guy. I had a friend of mine that went up and worked out there one time, and he was lifting one of the globe barbells, and he'd never lifted with a globe barbell. And if you've ever lifted one, when you lift it, the shot inside moves, and if you're not careful, it can knock you down. When you lift the thing up. Well, he lifts it up and drops it. And Klein came storming over and just lit into him, and he felt so bad. He was a teenager at the time, and so he goes in, takes a shower. He's going to leave. He takes a shower, turns the shower on, and broke the handle off of the shower knob. And he was too scared to tell Sig what he'd done, and he put it in his pocket and left and never went back.
Yeah, that's one of my regrets is not going there.
Oh,
yeah, because he ran that place until '72, I think. And that place was in business till the early '70s, and I regret because I could have went there, but I didn't really know that much about him at the time. But I was into training since the mid '60s, so man, I wish I knew about him. I would have went down there.
Oh yeah, it wasn't. It didn't impress me that much at the time. These old globe barbells and stuff. I just wasn't interested. All I was interested in is how many sets should I do to build my arms. This kind of thing.
Yeah, back then we probably thought it was junk, and now we wish we could get our hands on it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. A lot of it went to Japan, I understand. I don't know if the actual weights did, but a lot of the memorabilia that came out of his gym went, from what I understand, to a buyer in Japan, a collector, and so it'll never be, it'll never get back over here, likely.
So, Mike, I know collectors really want to get their hands on Jackson equipment, too. And, Jackson just has a great reputation. I know they were, custom-made, home crafted in a basement, and they were just like a work of art. So could you fill us in about the history of the Jackson Barbell Company and what made them so special?
Well, just in general terms, Jackson started in the early 30s, and apparently he saw one of the York Olympic sets, and it was probably the one that was brought over from Germany that they copied. And he felt that he could make a better one. So he went home and, to his basement workshop. At that time, I believe, was living at home with his dad, and decided he was going to make some. And I guess he was happy with what he did. I have no idea what happened to those early ones, but obviously a competitor of York, but he did it all in his basement. He got shipments of plates. Of course, he didn't cast the plates, but shipments of plates would come in, and he would hand carry them from first of all, go pick them up, then bring them home, hand carry them down the steps into his basement, and there he would work welding and milling and doing all the stuff that was needed for his very finely tuned sets. A friend of mine was a New Jersey state cop, and he wanted some Jackson equipment, so he decided he would find it. He was over in that area. And he went and he looked at the address and he looked at the house and he said, well, this couldn't be it. So he knocked on the door and he said, excuse me, he thought there'd be smokestacks and and the lady answered the door, Mrs. Jackson, and he said, excuse me, I'm looking for the Jackson Barbell Company. Can you? She says, yeah, he's downstairs. Go through here. So he goes down and meets Andy, and that it just weights all over the place. He said it was the biggest mess you ever saw.
That's unbelievable. And the business he did out of his basement was just unreal, right? He had orders from all over the world down there.
Absolutely. Now, of course, he never did the kind of volume that York did, and he wasn't as well known. As I understand it, he took the when he later on got into machines, leg presses and that kind of thing, he would assemble them and then disassemble them, take them out into his driveway, put them together again, make sure they worked, and then disassemble them again for shipping. It was a real one-man operation. But what he did, as far as I know, was the first one, at least the first American company, to use roller bearings for his 1A Olympic bar, and of course they're just now getting into that. Even York, I think, now has a roller bearing bar. They're very expensive. So he was making those back in the 30s. The Jackson 1A, which is sort of the most prized thing of the Jackson equipment. Then later on he made different ones. He made a 1B and he made a Jackson number 2 and a number 3 and a number 4 and a number 5 and a number 6. All these were somewhat different, and they got cheaper as the numbers went up.
Yeah, Bob Hoffman must have hated them, right?
No, I think they had they respected each other, and there's no evidence, I don't think, of them ever, growling at each other or like certainly nothing like what Weider and Hoffman went through. But Jackson did later on in the 50s ran into a relationship with the guy that made the first easy curl bar, and Jackson was making these bars. Someone told him that Hoffman was also making them, so Jackson owned the patent then, and he apparently called Bob up and said, hey, I got the patent on those. So they ended up, I think he got $1,000 or $1,500 or something for the patent rights. So then York went and did almost identical thing. The only thing York didn't put knurling on.
Wow, I remember that. And I think they spelt the curl with a K or something just to change it, right?
Yeah, easy curl bar. Right?
Remember that?
Yeah. And the first one, if you're looking for the old ones, the first curl bars or easy curl bars had a welded inside collar, and then apparently after a pretty short time, they must have found out it was cheaper just to put on a little kind of a chintzy collar that they used, a set screw collar. But the first ones had a nice welded-on collar, and that was a nice piece.
What inventory of Jackson equipment do you have, Mike?
Well, what I have now is not much. I have a Jackson exercise set out there, a standard set that I dearly love, and that's what I use mostly for benching. I have different brands like Bur-Bel and Jackson and Good and all these out there. And what I like to do in order to, so that they, so they don't feel bad or feel neglected, I try to use a different set for each exercise when I'm out there. So the Jackson is my bench exercise bar, and so there's standard plates, 1 1/16 hole or a little bigger than that. And but at one time I had the Jackson 1A plates. I never had a bar, but I had the plates. And then I had a Jackson number 4 and a number 5 complete set with the bars. And I don't have those any longer. I do have a Jackson Easy Curl bar, though, and that I only know of 1 or 2 other ones. So that's right.
Yeah, the prominent plate on the cover picture of Iron Nation in my book that I did with Drew Israel, the prominent plate is the Jackson plate. I think I told you already. I got that from Osmo, because I don't have a Jackson plate, but Osmo took the picture for me, so I told him how I wanted it, and he made it perfect. He lined those plates up, and he took the picture, and it came out great. So that's Osmo's Jackson plate on there.
Yeah, that's neat. And I think there's a York Globe dumbbell on there, and I think you were telling me, I've forgotten this, but there's a little, very small Weider plate on there, right?
Yeah, I know. I told you. I got a Lico on there, York and Jackson, and then I got Marcy on there, and then I put a tiny. A little, because I wanted to acknowledge him, but I didn't want to make a lot of it. So I think I put a 2.5 in the corner, a Weider plate. But that was all designed, That wasn't by accident.
Funny story. I have an Ivanko stainless steel Olympic bar that I dearly love. I mean, this thing is great. It's a little shorty, 5.5 pound with 5.5 feet, which is just right for my gym. And Tom Linseer, who owns Ivanko, was visiting one time, and I told him, I said, that's really kind of sad. I really like that bar. I said, isn't it a shame that I have those crummy Weider rubber plates on it? If I just had some Jackson plates, some Ivanko plates to put on it. So he sent me some Ivanko plates so that it would look right.
It wasn't until recently. I mean, I've been a York guy my whole life, and I've only had York plates. But now, in recent years, since York has been sold so many times, and just because it's not run by the same people, so the quality isn't the same. I think recently they've improved and got better again, but just because it's not the same York, then in recent years I've not had that same loyalty. So now I think I'm probably loyal to Ivanko now. So, but luckily I bought most of my plates a long time ago. I mean, I have my plates I've had for decades, and when York was still good, but If I have to buy new plates now, I buy Ivanko.
Yeah, they're hard to beat. Tom Linseer is just a stickler for making them right, and I love his stuff. Now, the YMCA here in St. Augustine has York Olympic bars, and they're the newer ones that are made in Canada. And frankly, they're quite good. At least I like them. They're a hard chrome, which is really good for Florida. Yeah, I have no complaints about those at all. But then I'm not a heavy lifter, so the bigger guys are going to be the ones that'll give those the test, I'm sure.
I've heard the quality is it's improving in recent years, so I'm glad about that. I wish someone that loved barbells and loved the history would take over that company and try to make it great again. Just like they did with Harley Davidson. Remember back in the 70s? Yeah. Harley Davidson was on the verge of going bankrupt. Yeah. Well, they were in bankruptcy court, and they were about to just go completely under. And then some millionaire guy who loves motorcycles bought the company and just made them great again. And made them better than ever. So I wish something like that would happen to York.
I do too. I've been there on a couple of occasions, and in fact went there one time, and Schmitty took me around. You remember, he just recently passed on.
Right, I met him when I went to York.
Yeah, nice fella, and he took. I went with my dad that time, and of course my dad didn't have any interest really in the weights or anything, but he went with me, and we toured the factory. In those days, they still had weights coming down on the on hooks, and it was still a factory in those days. Those days are gone.
So, Mike, tell us that funny story that you told me the other day where you were traveling and you were in Fort Pierce, the town that I live in right now. And you told me this unbelievable story that I told Osmo, and he couldn't believe it. But you were in a YMCA, and you stumbled upon some rare globe barbells, and you got them practically for free because the people there thought they were junk, and you ended up trading. You said, well, let me just give you a couple of cans of protein. So you got these rare globe barbells for a couple of cans of protein, right?
That's right. In fact, they didn't even really want the protein, but I felt bad, going away without giving them something. I don't know what they finally did. He may have thrown it away. But this YMCA was in the middle of a kind of a seedy area, and it was an old YMCA. And I kept pressing them at the desk. I told them that I sold equipment, and I did in those days. I repped out some steel dumbbells that were quite nice, actually. So it would give me an in to go in to see gyms, and I still today love to go to gyms. And so the woman at the desk kept telling me, "No, they don't have a weight room anymore, and they don't have any more equipment. It's all gone." And I kept pressing, and finally she says, "Well, let me ask the maintenance guy." So they bring up Big John or whatever his name was, and said, "We got any equipment?" And he said, "Well," he said, "it might be in the storeroom." So he says, "Come on with me." We went down this long hallway, and he took a padlock, took a key, opened this padlock, and we go in this door, and it squeaks, and the only light in there was, I think, from a hole in the roof because the floor was wet, and it was bad. And right in the middle of this room, it lit up from the light from the hole in the roof, just like God saying, "Here," and here's the two pair of York globe weights, and as I remember, they were 80s and 85s or something like that. And I looked at it and I said, "My God," I said, "would they consider selling them?" And he said, "If you don't buy them," he says, "it'll be here another 20, 30 years." He says, "Take them out of here." So I said, "Well, gee, let me give you something for them." I said, in those days I had my protein powder, and I said, "Let me give you some protein powder. You can sell it at the front desk and make some money." He said, "Fine." So I gave it to him and hobbled out of the gym with those. There's another quick story if we've got some time. One of my favorites.
Oh, we got all the time in the world.
I went to a YMCA in St. Petersburg, in Florida. And it was built in the 20s, and I'd been in there on a couple of occasions, and they had some pretty old equipment in there, globe dumbbells and some old York barbells that had been welded up. And I remembered particularly that one of the barbells they had in the rack had those old long neck collars. I don't know if you've seen them. They made them in 1948, and they were about I believe about 4 inches long. They were huge, and they had welded these collars to make a fixed weight barbell. Anyway, so I go in one time, and they said, "Well, I said, "Well, they said, well, we're moving. We're moving to a new location. We got a new building." And I said, "Well, what happened to the old equipment?" And they said, "Well, I don't." The guy said, "I don't really know what happened to that old stuff." And I said, "Well," I had been in there, I guess, not too long before that, and seen that they had piled a bunch of it in this one room, which was now the music room or something. And so we went down to this room, and they weren't in there, but there were some stairs going up, and there was this paneling that covered the area under the stairs. And it was done rather quickly, obviously, just some cheap paneling put up there. And there was enough where I could look in, if I flexed it a little bit, I could look in there. And sure as heck, somebody had put all that stuff underneath this cubby hole under the stairs. So
wow.
I said, "What are you going to do with all that stuff?" And he said, "God, I don't know." He says, "We just put it under there because we didn't want to look at it anymore." And so ended up, I'm in there with a claw hammer. We're taking off the paneling, and there is an old leg press machine that they couldn't get out because it had been built before they built the hallway and everything, and it was like the guy that builds the boat in his basement. They couldn't get it out, and it was sitting in there, with a pair of Jackson 100-pound Olympic plates on it. So that got my attention, and then there were a bunch of barbells. There were some York fixed weight dumbbells and barbells and all this, a whole bunch of stuff. And so I ended up working a deal. I traded them they needed for their aerobics classes some of these like rubber expanding things, that they used at least in those days. It had hand grips on both sides. So I talked to the physical trainer. She said, well, we need a few of these for our classes. She said, if you'll give us those, I'll let you have that stuff underneath this. So I brought them back. And so then we had the problem. This was in the basement, and the stuff had been built around it to the point where it was hard to get out. So we ended up going into the swimming pool, which was downstairs. I'm sorry, it's a long story, but swimming pool was downstairs, and there were these high windows that were street level, even though the pool was in the, if you can picture that, the pool was in the basement, but they had these windows that looked out onto the alley in the back. And we ended up opening those windows and pushing this leg press machine and all this other stuff out the window into the alley in the back, and I drove away. And most of that stuff is gone, but I got some really, really neat stuff out of that, and it was amazing.
We'll be back with more right after this.
This segment brought to you by VitalNutritionStore.com. Did you know that more than 7 million Americans suffer from coronary heart disease, the most common form of heart disease? Regardless of your age or condition, adding Cardio for Life to your daily regime will dramatically improve your cardiovascular condition. Cardio for Life has been the top-selling L-arginine product in the marketplace now for more than 3 years. It is also the top-selling product at VitalNutritionStore.com. Formulated by Dr. Harry Elwart, the best-selling author of Let's Stop the #1 Killer of Americans Today, Dr. Harry believes together we can prevent and reverse heart disease. Cardio for Life comes in 3 wonderful flavors: orange, peach, and grape, and is gluten-free, sugar-free, and sodium-free. Please see our complete line of natural products at VitalNutritionStore.com. That's VITAL Nutritionstore.com.
Randy Roach shocked the world with the release of his first volume of Muscle, Smoke, and Mirrors several years ago. It was a masterpiece of over 500 pages with such in-depth research and detail that it was not only surprising, but shocking and mind-blowing. It was truly one of the best Iron Game history books ever written. He followed that with Volume 2, another epic book with over 700 pages of equal depth and detail. All serious Iron Game fans need to have these books. Please visit Randy's website at randyroach.ca. That's RANDYROACH.ca.
Listen to how Iron Game legend and the Iron Master editor Osmo Kehaw describes the book Supernatural Strength. Have you ever wondered how much real-world experience authors have when they write books about weight training? Who is that person behind the computer? What do they really know about the Iron Game? If you picked up this book, Supernatural Strength, you have definitely come to the right place. The author, Bob Whelan, has spent several decades in the Iron Game trenches training himself, competing and coaching in powerlifting, earning academic credentials too numerous to mention, and thousands of hours of training and instructing athletes and trainees of all levels at his Washington, D.C. gym since 1990. He's not only devoted his life to motivating and pushing people to heights they have never been to, but elevating the trainees' understanding why certain methods work better than others. Bob is one of the most respected and revered trainers in the business today. This book is sure to surprise and amaze you at the same time. Order now at supernaturalstrength.com. That's supernaturalstrength.com.
Don't you think it would be so much easier getting into shape if you had a personal coach? Just like all the celebrities do. Well, now you can. Bob Whelan of WebStrengthCoach.com wants to get you out of your rut and coach you to success. He's dedicated to helping you achieve your strength and fitness goals through your hard work and his expert guidance. Bob will help you with strength training, muscle building, fitness, nutrition, and motivation. He'll make sure you achieve your maximum physical potential. You can get one-on-one training with Bob through his website, WebStrengthCoach.com. He will develop a personalized program tailored to your individual needs, a program right for you. Bob will give you feedback after every workout. This is old school fitness and nutrition, no fads and no gimmicks. Bob will use proven natural techniques to make sure you are satisfied. So visit WebStrengthCoach.com today and let Bob help you reach your best self. WebStrengthCoach.com.
Do you enjoy history without social engineering? Reading about our founding fathers? Economics from a capitalist perspective? Wisdom from modern patriots? Welcome to UncleSamBooks.com, where virtues like rugged individualism, hard work, and the American dream dominate. UncleSamBooks.com. Great books for homeschooling. UncleSamBooks.com.
If you want to become as strong and muscular as possible with health in mind, and without lowering yourself to using steroids, the best advice can be found in the classic strongman books of long ago. These are the best books ever written on the subjects of strength training, weightlifting, strongman training, iron game history, and old-time physical culture. Many of them can still be found at physicalculturebooks.com. There you will find good, honest, time-tested wisdom from the great old-time strongmen. To maximize your natural muscular and strength potential, please visit physicalculturebooks.com.
Listen to Ken Manny, head strength and conditioning coach at Michigan State University, describe the book Iron Nation. A masterpiece text on some of the most intriguing and compelling personal stories, iron game history, and gut-wrenching training routines ever put to paper. If you truly love hard training without all the frills of pomp and circumstance so common today, you will love Iron Nation. Written by lifters for lifters. If you love weight training, you will love Iron Nation. Order now at ironnation.com. That's IRON Nation.com.
If you would like to promote your business on MindForce Radio, we would love to hear from you. Please let us know if you are interested in a 30 or 60-second voice commercial or a banner website ad. Please contact Bob using the contact information provided on mindforceradio.com.
You're listening to Natural Strength Night on MindForce Radio.
Volkswagen bus in those days, and it was dragging, and I had to take it all the way to down to Boca Raton. You know, had a lot of weight.
You made some pretty good trades for protein powder and chest expander springs, right?
Absolutely. Maybe I got in the wrong business. I don't know. But I just saying, you know, you're dealing with something that somebody doesn't really want anyway.
Tell us about your Bur-Bel and Burr collection, and tell us about the company, because I know you told me off the air about Bur-Bel, and then later they just changed to Burr. But I think you have a lot of those barbells in your collection, right?
Yeah, well, I did at one time. Had a few. As I mentioned earlier, I got a set, a complete barbell with the sleeves and all that kind of stuff at a garage sale in the early 70s, and just kind of. When I had my gym, that set was up in my attic. I had no idea what I wanted to do with it. The only thing is I knew I liked it. It was kind of cool. And the first barbell I ever had when I lived in Germany, going to high school, was a Burr. And so I wanted to get that. So anyway, I had this set, and then as I got into it and learned more of the history, I found out that actually Burr was started back in the actually in the late 20s was when the idea was formed, and the guy that started it decided that he was going to make something. The thing that bothered him about weights was the fact that it was hard to change your weights. When you did a set and then you had to take the collars off and you had to slide off and stuff. So he came up with the idea of a Burr quick change, and this barbell, of which I know of only one in the world today. But anyway, it had a square sleeve, if you can picture that. Instead of a rounded sleeve at the end, it was square. And what you did, they had U-shaped plates, and the U-shaped plates fit down over this square sleeve and locked by a little gate at the bottom on a spring. And the idea was that you picked the thing up with a thing that looked like longshoreman look. You hook this thing into the plate, into this little hole. You hold it over the bar and you let it slide down, and you didn't have to take the old plates off to add weights or take off weights. That was the whole idea. It's a little hard to describe, but it was called the Burr Quick Change, and he came out with that, I think, in the mid 30s. And he also made, and it was a great. It was stainless steel. It was revolving sleeve. Those sleeves actually revolved. It was an amazing thing. It was just more expensive. And I don't remember exactly, but I think in those days you paid like $10 for a good Olympics set. Not a good Olympic set, but a good exercise set would have been about $10 or something. And these things were like $30, so they were expensive for the time. He formed his own company with a foundry, cast his own weights, cut his own bars, did all the work himself. Not himself, but his people did the work, and he got quite large. It made. I think he was probably the second or third biggest in the late 30s, probably just under York. And then as he got into the 50s, he was still up there making regular barbells, but selling them cheaper than anybody else. And they went out of business, I think, in '74, about the time Jackson went out, when the fellow died, and no one took it over. A company called Roberts bought the patterns, and they came out with weights that were the same pattern, but they used the Roberts name.
My original little dumbbell that I got when I was 10 years old, I still have it, and it's a Roberts dumbbell.
Oh yeah, sure. A little solid.
So Roberts
dumbbell?
came from it's a solid like 10-pound dumbbell. Yeah, I never really knew where Roberts came from. So thanks for that background. I still have it though.
Yeah, Burr begat Roberts. When Burr went out, Roberts took over their machinery, and I assume the foundry as well. I don't know that. And they started making their own with the Burr patterns. The main difference between the two and the originally was that the Roberts bars were much thicker. They were 1 1/8 inches instead of 1 inch like Burr used. So they had they had a bigger hole and all that kind of stuff. But the collars and everything originally were the same as Burr collars. One of the big mysteries of this whole iron collecting thing is what the word Burr meant, B-U-R. Started out as Bur-Bel, B-U-R-B-E-L, and then later they shortened it to just Burr. But nobody knows where the name came from. Somebody thought it. I asked Dan Lurie, and Dan thought it might have been the fellow's wife's name, but I think we found out later that was not true. So we don't know what Burr means, where it came from. Who knows?
The rare Samson barbell.
Yeah, Samson was in business, I believe, in Baltimore back in the 20s when Milo was around, and they looked just like the Milo, the globe kind of set up the Milo Duplex. But they were a direct competitor to Milo. I don't think they sold that many. I've only seen a couple of ads. My friend Reuben Weaver sent me an ad that came out of Physical Culture, advertising Samson barbells, and I think their big thing was they were less expensive than Milo was, and that was it. So I met a guy real quick on the phone when I had the magazine and talked to him briefly because somebody told me he had both weights, and we had a nice chat on the phone, whatever, and some months later his wife called me and said that I just want to let you know that he had passed on, and I said, oh, really sad about that. And of course, I'm thinking the dumbbell. He had that Samson dumbbell, and so I didn't say anything. I mean, come on, Jim, gone. And she said, "You remember that old dumbbell he had?" I said, "Oh yeah, I do remember that because he had sent me a picture." She said, "Do you want it?" And I said, "I would love to have it, but be sure to ask your family, children and so on, if they want it before we do anything." And she says, "I'll do that." She called me back the next day and said, "No, nobody's interested. If you want it, come get it." So that's how I got that. Some things just drop in your lap, and in other things you end up paying more than you want to pay, but where else are you going to find more,
Who are the biggest collectors? I know Osmo and Havner and you and, Reuben Weaver. And who else?
Paul Quinn is a big one, but there are probably 12, 15 fairly major collectors these days that have a lot of stuff. Osmo, as you know, it seems to me has like 40 Olympic bars or something like that. I mean,
the move almost killed him, and he said he doesn't think he can move again because there's so much work to move all of his stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I did the same thing when I moved to St. Augustine from Clearwater. My son-in-law and I packed all the stuff on a little trailer behind his truck, and we had it packed in there good. And there must have been thousands of pounds of equipment anyway, dumbbells and everything. And I followed him up there, and this thing was kind of weaving, and I gave him instructions. I said, if that thing gets to be a problem, pull over to the side of the road, dump him. I said, I'm sick of looking at him at this point. Of course, that didn't last. We got him up here, but I was tired of him. By the time I'd loaded him onto there and everything, I began to think, well, I don't really want this stuff anyway. But once we got it in here and loaded in, why, of course, the romance began again.
And Mike, we have time for one more. What are your most prized old magazines, books, and courses? I know you told me earlier that you have some really rare courses.
Yeah, I've got the courses I really like because I started with a Charles Atlas course, right? And I still have my course, right? My Charles Atlas course and the membership card and all this stuff. And it's even got my measurements written on the back in pencil, written in 1954. No, I will not tell you what my measurements were in 1954. But I did keep that, and I've got, and they're in another room, so I can't rattle them. I'll try to rattle them off. I've got Atlas and Jowett and Barker and Tony Sansone had a course, a very good course, and I've got that one. The name's kind of.
You ever heard of one called? I think it was called Universal Bodybuilding. It was out of Dearborn, Michigan, I think.
Yeah, back in the 70s, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 68 or something like that. I got the Universal Bodybuilding course. I actually got pretty good results with it because I was in high school then. But before that, I did use the Charles Atlas course because my friend had it. I didn't buy it, but my friend had it. He let me borrow it after he used it, and so I actually followed the whole thing, and I remember it. And I remember doing the dips between the chairs, and I still do those.
Oh, yeah.
I still have that. Yeah, I mean, because they are good. The dips between the chairs and a lot of the stuff he did, drinking the milk and Overall, it was a positive experience. I mean, it was good, especially for my age.
It was good. Yeah, he's one of my heroes. He had a nice physique. He wasn't a really big guy, but he had, even Bob Hoffman said he had a beautiful physique, and he did. And he, a lot of people say that those were isometrics. That's incorrect. They weren't isometrics because you actually moved. When you're doing arms, for instance, you resisted with one arm while you curled with the other arm. So that's not isometrics. Isometrics, you don't move at all. So Charles got his from Bernarr Macfadden, another hero of mine, who introduced that form of exercise back in the early 1900s. And I think even before that, I think in Germany there was someone that was doing that sort of thing. So Charles didn't invent it, but he made it popular, and he made a lot of money with that course.
Yeah, well, Charles Atlas' name originally was Angelo Siciliano. Then he changed it to Charles Atlas, and then when he was a boy, he worked with Earl Lederman, and they both were boyhood friends, and they worked together for Bernarr Macfadden. I know you know that, but it's amazing that Bernarr Macfadden trained these two guys who both went on to become huge, businessmen in two of the biggest mail order courses in the world. I mean, Lederman was even bigger than Atlas at first, and then he made some bad business decisions. But during the Depression, they both.
He made a bad marriage decision, killed him.
Yeah,
he married Miss Alaska, and as I understand it, she took him to the cleaners, and he never recovered from that. And
he liked the high life too.
Yes, apparently was quite the dude. Vic Boff, who you know well, met Lederman, and he used to tell me stories about Earl Lederman. He met him in the post office one day, looked around, and there was Earl Lederman. And the Lederman course was actually good. They used rubber strands, and I believe the story is that Atlas wanted to have rubber strands with his course, but there was a problem in getting shipment. So Frederick Tilney, who was his partner at the time, who actually wrote the course, said, well, let's go without anything at all, and because we got these orders here, we got to fill them. We don't have anything to send them. So they then came up with the exercise thing, and then later on, the fellow that became his partner later was an advertising guy, and he came up with the name Dynamic Tension. So.
Tilney and the Depression and a bunch of other factors made, and it turned out to be great for business, right? Atlas really did lift weights. It's just that, during the Depression, you can't really sell weights and ship weights around. So, what he did was helpful, and it helped a lot of people. But the truth is, Angelo Siciliano, or I might be saying his name wrong, but he changed his name to Charles Atlas. But he did train with weights.
Oh, absolutely.
That's true, right?
In fact, Tilney tells in his book that they used to work out in Atlas's office with weights, but they would roll them and kind of hide them. And I knew a guy who used to work out at the New York Athletic Club where Atlas worked out, and he told me that Atlas had his weights in a box, and it was locked, and only he could use them.
He couldn't be seen with them, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Absolutely.
Bad for business.
Bad for business. But like you say, and I said too, I got good results with it because I had not trained before, and hey, it was great.
Yep, most of the stuff he said on there was good, positive information, and I think I was only like 10 years old when I was just starting out getting interested in training and physical culture when I got that. So for the age I was, that was perfect, and it was great. I mean, it gave me a good foundation.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely, and so I have a lot of respect for him. I think the best course of all of those, the mail order courses, was George Jowett's. Even though it was done with a fairly small pair of weights, again, you got people started, and they could always go to the advanced course and so on. But Jowett's mail order course, very similar to Atlas, except that he used dumbbells.
Well, Mike, you're a wealth of information. Very interesting conversation here. It was great having you on the show. So we just want to thank you again.
Well, it's always nice to talk to somebody that's interested in this sort of thing, and it was delightful. And I hope to talk to you again. And since you're in Fort Pierce, we'll have to. We just got to get together.
Don't be a flamingo. You have to do your squats. Don't be a flamingo. Real lifters work their legs.
That's going to do it for this edition of Natural Strength Night on mindforceradio.com. Please bookmark that website, mindforceradio.com. Bob is always looking for new writers for naturalstrength.com who are old school, hardcore, write with passion, and have a strong anti-steroid stance. He also wants your training questions so they can be answered on the show. Please send your articles and training questions to Bob at mindforceradio@earthlink.net. Thanks for listening. See you next time.